Welcome to the Communicate on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Matt Curtis. You're listening to episode 10. I can't believe it. The last time I tried this intro was wrong because we're already on 10. So episode 10 of season 3. This week, we're going to talk about something that I think might be a little bit difficult to get, I guess. I know for me, I've wrestled with this for a really long time, probably my whole career, and probably even longer than that. I'm thinking all the way back to college. But I want to talk a little bit about the organization's passion is not your passion. I think you need to be careful about that. I think you need to be careful about saying that the organization's passion is your passion. And obviously we're going to unpack it, but the last episode we talked about was really kind of, it was about stress. It was about the emotional stress, the deadline stress, those types of things, and how there's a difference there and how it's important for you to think through the emotional side of the experiences that you're having so that you can respond correctly, because they're not all just like getting things done or executing. One of the most really kind of foundational principles that I learned early in people management, in the creative space in particular, was that there's a real tendency for many, I think especially in the church or the nonprofit space, creative, but there's a real tendency for people to swoop in and overperform to compensate for underperformers. And so what I mean by that is you have somebody on the team who's not executing at a high enough level. And really the mission is so important that we can't allow underperformance to exist without fixing it. And so we can't let anything fail. And so we all step up and we compensate for that person who is underperforming. Well, the problem that we run into there is that we don't let underperformance be seen at that point. We end up hiding it. And so long-term, what that means is you have a team of high performance people who are overburdened and are burning out. And then you have dead weight on the team that hasn't been appropriately dealt with because nobody knows that they're dead weight. And so then you have toxicity in your culture. Then you have bitterness between different factions or teams or people. And it's just a terrible situation that leads to a toxic culture. So that may feel like a rabbit trail to you, but I promise you it's not. I think the core problem here is when we jump onto the passion train of the organization. And this is a tricky one because you should care about what the organization does. So I'm not advocating that we turn into the like a perspective of we're just making widgets and this is a job that I don't care about and that I hate what I'm doing, but I'm just getting a paycheck and clocking in and clocking out. That's not a good, I think that's not a good soul position to be in, to be honest with you. I mean, our work is worship. Like that's what we do. We worship God in the things that we do, in the little things, in everything that you do. And so I don't want you to go that far. I don't want me to go that far. But I do think we end up causing ourselves a lot of undue stress and concern when we over buy in to the mission, or we even overvalue our contribution. Progress and impact takes time, and that's okay. I think we need to be comfortable with that. We need to be comfortable with the fact that God moves at a pace that is different than our own. He moves at a pace that really prioritizes sanctification, the process of our growth, our deepening of understanding of who He is. It's about Him ultimately. The walking through life is a lot more about Him, I think, than we think it is. We're obsessed with ourselves and our passions and the mission that we feel called to. And we kind of need to get over ourselves a little bit in the midst of all this. And so what I'm finding with passion, specifically with regards to the mission of the organization, it leads us to make bad decisions. It leads us to overwork. It leads us to alienate people who are outside of that missional focus. It leads us to not relating well to people that are pursuing other things. So if I work at a church and someone else works at a corporate enterprise, I look down on them because they're not working in ministry. And so it breeds those types of those perceptions and those perspectives, which are really damaging to relationships, but also ultimately to what the church is supposed to be. The church isn't church staff. That's not what the church is. And so I think we end up creating this exclusive club of people where, oh, you're a volunteer? Cool, you're on the inside with volunteers, but you're not staff. Oh, you're staff, but you're just on the operations side, you're not a pastor? Okay, well, you're on staff, that's cool, but you're not a pastor. Oh, you're a pastor? Ooh, but are you an associate pastor? Or you're a student's pastor? Okay, well, I mean, you're a pastor, but you're not like an associate pastor. And like it just keeps going up the ranks. And we do that because we assume that each of these different levels is moving forward this super important agenda or this super important mission. But like, I mean, I guess I'm just going to be blunt. Like, so what? Like, the church is not ours. I mean, Scripture is clear about that. It's Christ's church. He's building it. We get to participate. And so really what it is that every person, from the person in the pews who's only there for an hour 15 every Sunday, to the person who is the senior pastor who is prepped, we're all just participants in the church that is not ours, that is Christ's, that he is building. So, like, be careful about allowing the passion of the work that you're doing to alienate you from the people that you're actually trying to reach, or the people that you're supposed to lock arms with and really live your life shoulder to shoulder with. And I think the same is true in the nonprofit space. I think that there are certain nonprofits that have a mission that is very, that resonates with different people. So for me, there's, certain nonprofits that really resonate with me. There's others, frankly, that I just care less about. Like it's not important to me. It doesn't really move me in a compelling way. And so I think what I'm beginning to see in our kind of Christian bubble, I guess, is a lot of people alienating each other because they are passionate about their mission. And ultimately what's being cultivated is that there's a rightness and a wrongness to the different missions that people have, or the different passions and drives that people have in terms of their ministries. And so now, kind of dovetailing a little bit onto the stress side of things, I found it causing me a tremendous amount of stress when I overemphasize the mission of the organization in the work that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. Because sure, there's an urgency to some of these things, but probably not as many as we think. And so there's an appropriate place that all of these things kind of live in. But I think we begin to we lose perspective on the movement of God in our lives and the movement of God in the world. I was reading through, I'm doing a series on TikTok right now in Psalm 103, and I'm just sort of reading through the things that David says about God. Like, how do we identify who God is? Like, what do Christians believe about who God is? That's the series. And one of the things that he's talking about is, it kind of alludes to the speed at which, or the pace at which God works. And he's talking about justice. And it says that justice will be achieved for the oppressed. And there's a dissonance that happens there, because we look around and we're like, justice is not achieved. There's injustice that happens. So what are you talking about, David? What's interesting is that he's talking about the totality of time. And so there's this idea that those who oppress will pay for it. There will be justice, but it may actually not even be on this earth. And so I think as I reflect on that, I want to make sure that I'm careful about prioritizing the work that we're doing in our nonprofits, in our churches, in a very marathoned mindset. I think that we're really consumed with the sprint. We keep having these objectives that are very short term, and we're not really thinking about the fact that what's going to happen in 400 years. Like, we're not even cognizant of the fact that God will be working in 400 years, that God will be active and moving in the lives of Christ followers. Like, I don't even know what happened 400 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? Like, in the United States, our country wasn't even a thing. Like, oh, that's interesting. Huh. Okay, so I mean, we're really obsessed with today, the here and now. And I think it's good for us to be active and to be pursuing things that we believe in and that we're passionate about. But I think I'm seeing a trend of people overemphasizing it, and I think it's causing a lot of stress and it's causing a lot of division. And God speaks to actually both of those things. We're supposed to be anxious for nothing, and we're supposed to be living in unity. And so maybe that's kind of the primary charge. Don't let your passion, or I would argue more importantly, don't let the passion of the organization define success for you. So for me, success is being able to care for my family. We're walking through a challenging season where there's some health things that we're walking through, and we're adjusting to a new area. And my priority, my primary mission and ministry right now is caring for my family. That means that my job is second. Like, that's what it means. It means that I'm going to work hard when I'm working, but I'm going to do my best to not obsess over the things that I'm doing. And I'm going to put it in its appropriate place, because this is not the season for me where I have the luxury of being able to primarily focus on my work. And I'm realizing more and more that I've had more seasons like that where I haven't chosen my family. And so I just want to caution you, as someone who's been in the ministry space and really like the passion-driven space for a long time, going on 20 years, thinking all the way back to college. Don't let the passion of the mission overwhelm you to the point where you're dropping the things that only you can minister in, or the things that you are specifically called to. So nobody else is going to be my kid's dad and my wife's husband. Like, that's the ministry that's uniquely mine. That's what I get the opportunity to invest in. Wherever it is right now that God has placed me, I have people in my life that I can minister to and I can represent Christ to. Like, I get that chance. So those are really some things that have been on my mind lately about passion, about really even about stress a little bit, but just the appropriate placement of the things that we're doing so that we're really working hard in the right ways. And we're also trying to strive towards this balance. I think COVID was fantastic at giving us the opportunity to blow everything up. And so be careful as you're rushing back into normalcy. Be careful not to just like replace everything back to the way it was. Really spend some time identifying, what do I care about? What is it that's important to me? And not from a selfish perspective, like, what are the things I believe God has gifted me to do? So, practical example, I believe that, I've seen fruit when I teach. Whenever you do those spiritual gifts assessment things, teaching always comes as the top result for me. Well, my job for the last 16 years hasn't been in teaching. So I made a change, and I tried really hard to get into spaces where I could teach, but it was clear that that wasn't a fruitful exercise, at least in that context. And so I decided to leave. I said, okay, I'm out, because teaching is a really high priority to me, because I believe that God has gifted me in that area. And not in a selfish maneuver, at least I hope not, that wasn't my intent, but I want to be investing in the gifts that God has given me for the benefit of the church, because that's the point of spiritual gifts. So like, I'm going to make that change. And that means that I'm doing the podcast again. I took a year off because life was crazy and chaotic. And when we landed here, I thought, we have a really unique opportunity to rebuild our life because COVID broke it all. So what do I want to rebuild? What blocks do I want to use to rebuild? And so I'm doing a teaching series on TikTok where I'm talking through, what do Christians believe about blank? And I'm just going through the Bible saying, hey, here's the topic and this is what Christians believe about it. So I get a chance to teach. I'm manufacturing these opportunities to teach. I'm doing the podcast again. That's an opportunity for me to teach. My job now entails building an educational library for churches. I'm getting a chance to teach. In my church, I had a conversation about communications and web stuff and strategy and all that. And I mentioned to them that I always design like a teacher. And I said, teaching is one of the things that I love doing, and I'm a big, it's kind of high on my spiritual gifts assessments. And they're like, great, we have some classes that we'd love for you to teach. And so I had the opportunity to make this decision and to make this change, and you do too. So don't let the passion of your organization prevent you from leaning into the things that God has actually gifted you to do. So that's kind of the caution is, sure, believe in what you're doing. I think that's great, man. If I don't enjoy what I'm, not even enjoy what I'm doing, if I don't believe in what I'm doing, if I don't think it's important or meaningful, man, I struggle so hard. That's a very important part of having a job and all that. But be careful not to let that overshadow how God has specifically and uniquely built you, because he probably didn't build you exactly like the mission of the organization that you serve. He built you in the way that he wanted you to be built. So pursue that. Don't be afraid of that. If this has been helpful to you, share it with a friend. I say that most episodes when I remember. Write a review. That's super helpful. If you have questions about anything or topics, I'm always willing to be helpful to get people going on the projects that they're working on, or in the areas where they're stuck. If you have a question, if you have a challenging situation, those are the things that I want to be helping people kind of work through. And so I'm sure that you hear it a lot from a lot of people, but legitimately, like, zero hesitation, I will email with you. I'll hop on a Zoom call with you. I'll give you my phone number, like whatever. But I want to be helpful to people that are pursuing the things that God has passioned them for. And I know that sometimes it's easy to get stuck not really knowing how to move forward. So happy to connect with you. You can find me social media, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's at mcurtis_co. So I'd love to connect. Until next time, keep communicating on purpose.